Dan and Nancy, welcome to the podcast. Super appreciate you all coming all the way out here and bringing some surprises for us.
Pleasure's all ours. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. So what do we have working with here today?
Two of our favorite bourbons.
Well, at least one of our favorite.
One?
We're a little bit boastful about this because this is Nancy's creation, working with our master distiller, Donis Todd. That's called Honeydew.
Oh, yeah.
But everything at Garrison Brothers started right here with the small batch.
So we're constantly in competition to see who can sell more of each.
Oh, okay.
We'll stand inside a liquor store for 3 hours.
I'm a little old school, so ladies first. So maybe we should try that one.
Let's start there.
Yeah?
This is Garrison Brothers Honeydew Bourbon, and it is an 80 proof spirit. It's really the only low proof bourbon that we do in all of our expressions at Garrison Brothers. We really are known for big and bold bourbons.
Yeah.
And everything we do does start with our small batch. It's the core and the backbone of our whole lineup of all of our bourbons. But Honeydew came about because, as I said, we like high proof bourbons. We want to lean into that Texas terroir and get everything that we can get out of those beautiful barrels of wood that we are aging our bourbon in. And when it's 115 degrees out, which I think, Mondo, it is today.
Right now, feels like it.
I'm not ready to drink one of our Balmoral bourbons at 115 proof. So many years ago, I said to Dan, I want to have something a little different.
Yep.
I want to have...
Not once, not twice.
Not once, yeah.
I want to have...
Which time did it stick, though?
Well, it never really did. That's the point, is that he kept saying no. No melons were harmed in the making of this bourbon,
good.
but it was on his honeydew list for a long time. And basically, Dan said, no, we're not going to do a low-proof bourbon. We're not going to do a bourbon that has any sort of infusion on it. Period, the end. The answer's no. And I didn't like that answer. So ultimately, I went to Donis Todd, our master distiller, and Donis and I collaborated years in the making and came up with this beautiful, really refreshing bourbon.
Yeah.
Very easy to drink. Let's give it a try.
Let's do it. The phrase is totally true. Happy wife, happy life.
That is so true.
Right?
So a little bit about the process that with making this bourbon, what we do is we pull barrels out of the barn that are already giving us honey notes. We taste it. We're small enough that we can taste every single barrel to decide which one's going to be included in which release.
Right.
So we're looking for honey notes in this one. Then we take all those barrels that the liquid came out of, we chop them up into these little wood cubes.
Okay.
We put them in a vat full of Burleson's Wildflower honey, the oldest honey company in Texas.
Yeah.
And they've been friends of ours for a long time. Their marketing director, Stacy Drab, approached us and said, hell yeah, we're in.
Another powerful woman.
So we started infusing the bourbon by taking a cheesecloth bag. We put all the honey cubes into the bag and dipped it into the bourbon every single day for 6 months.
Wow.
And then at the end of the process, we pulled that liquid out, bottled it, and named it Honeydew.
Nice. Beautiful. That's a great story.
Salud.
Salud. Here we go.
So I like honeydew neat, but it also is fabulous in a cocktail. A hot toddy in the winter, a gold rush in the summer.
Oh, yeah.
We do a lot of promotional events all over the country, and it's a wonderful way to have people enjoy bourbon in all climates.
Yeah.
And again, it really, our objective was to be sure that it was a fully balanced from the front of your palate all the way to the back.
Yeah, I feel it right now, right there in the back,
And just had that little touch of sweetness at the very back of your palate.
Yeah.
So it is still very bourbon forward, and it holds up pretty nicely.
Yeah, it holds up really nice. Yeah.
Keep that taste in mind in the front and the back and all over, because when you taste this one, it's going to be a totally different animal.
All right.
It's going to make you drool.
Okay. It's making me drool already.
This is Garrison Brothers Small Batch Bourbon Whiskey. This is the first bourbon whiskey made in America outside of Kentucky. We introduced the first bottles in 2010. It's 94 proof. I was helped along the way by a lot of the legends in Kentucky, Elmer T. Lee, David Pickerel, Drew and Evan Colesveen, a lot of the families that had been part of
the whiskey heritage.
Heritage. The people in Kentucky had been doing it for years. And they were just nice as they could be to me. And everybody thought I was out of my mind trying to make bourbon whiskey in Texas because why? Nobody was buying bourbon.
That's
no
right.
one was drinking bourbon, really. It was pretty sleepy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it had become very sleepy, and we introduced this, and it kind of took off. We kind of had a feeling it was going to happen that way. If we had been maybe 5 years earlier in the introduction of this, then we'd be the next Tito Beverages. But that didn't happen.
That didn't happen. Well, I think part of like understanding not only maybe whiskey and bourbon people, we are a friendly type.
Absolutely.
We are
Absolutely.
like, there is no elitism. There is just this idea that we can break bread, we can toast, we can have a nice drink, easy in the summer, or we can have a strong drink, right?
We have the best job in the world because we get to drink bourbon with new friends every night, and it's an amazing experience. I do say that good people want to do good things, and good bourbon brings them together.
I love that.
It ranks right up there.
That's right.
And,
You got the receipts
to
prove
I
it.
have no problem standing tall with my honeydew bourbon.
Right.
And you should
And
be
he
very
drinks
proud.
it many a night,
Yes,
too. Let me just tell
yes.
you.
You got to keep her in the money.
There you go.
Salud.
Solid.
Salud. Here we go.
So small batches are 94 proof. We're a wheated bourbon. And everything that we do is 4 years or older. And again, we have barrels from multiple cooperages, and we are all part of our Texas heat. Back in the day, Dan put the first liquid coming off the still, and those barrels just exploded all over the place.
You practically lost everything, right?
Yep.
So tell me about that.
Well, no one knew what was going to happen in the Texas climate. Nobody had ever aged bourbon in 100-degree temperatures all year long, and so it was an unknown factor in the process. And I knew there were going to be a lot of those challenges, things I didn't know.
Yeah.
Even though I'd studied really hard what was going on in Kentucky and how people were handling different treatments of the wood, different treatments of the barrels. But what we did is we decided, you know what, if this is a wood barrel and it's got half-inch staves all the way around, half-inch thick staves, and those are popping on us, then we got to do a couple of things. First of all, we got to create more headspace inside the barrel. So we were filling our barrels all the way up.
Oh, okay.
So when it got hot, it swells and it smashes up all the wood staves.
Yeah.
So, right? So what we did is we lowered our headspace a little bit more. We also had custom barrels built for us to our recipe that is still under NDA. Nobody can talk about what those recipes are. But they're thicker staves. And what that does, if you know that all the color and all the flavor in a bottle of bourbon comes from the sap in the wood, and now you've got thicker staves, you're absorbing more sap into the bourbon in a shorter amount of time.
Okay, I see.
Never knew if it would work, but it did.
It did. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. Well, it sounds like there was a lot of challenges, but you learned through that whole process.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Every day, even today. I mean, we have, as part of our mission statement, we're from Texas, so we're pretty bold. We just decided that we were going to make the best tasting, highest quality bourbon in the world. And we were also going to make better bourbon tomorrow than we do today. So again, they sound a little catchphrasy, but it really is true. It's really part of the fabric of what we do at Garrison Brothers, and what we expect everyone in our family that is a part of our team to do too. We want better bourbon tomorrow. Everything needs to move forward. It has to get better.
Yeah. If you look at the average age of our inventory, it's getting older and older and older, which also means it's getting lower and lower and lower in the barrel because of the angel share. So we'll pull barrels out of the barn that literally only have 4 inches of liquid left in them, but that 4 inches is really
good, right?
Talk about that liquid gold.
Yeah, liquid gold. So how do you balance life and the business, and you shared a little bit about some of the challenges. So how do you make this dream work?
We have become very accustomed to traveling together and to looking the other way with each of our weird little idiosyncrasies getting away. We'll be in Frisco, Texas tomorrow night doing a fundraising dinner there. The next day we'll be back at the ranch in High Texas celebrating the release of our cowboy bourbon with our Bourbon Camp volunteers, which is our old 300 people. That's our ambassador program. And they're all going to show up at 8 o'clock on Friday morning or Saturday morning. And we'll spend the weekend with them out there.
We do Bourbon Camp. It's camp for adults. It is nothing but fun, and it's all about bourbon morning, noon, and night.
Yeah, we have a an amazing chef out there. His name is Jack McDonald. And he called me. He had a restaurant in Plano, and I just happened to be in Dallas when he called me. And he was going to bitch. He was going to lay into me because he couldn't get bottles of Garrison Brothers. And he did it on the phone. And I'm sitting there going, oh, man. This guy's My distributor wasn't answering his calls to get him product on the shelf. And he laid into me. And I walked into the restaurant, him not knowing that I was even in the Plano area, and I sat down at his bar and I said, "Do you want to talk to me direct to my face now?"
There you go.
Then he made me lunch. It was amazing. So that's Jack McDonald.
And he's now our executive chef.
We're going to be shooting for Michelin stars in the next 2 years.
Oh, nice, nice. I love
awesome.
that. Well, I love the combination of enjoying a good bourbon and maybe like what goes well with it, with food and the flavors, and I love kind of curating some of that, and I'm sure that's kind of like how you imagine it as well.
Sure, yeah. Bread pudding, desserts, rich, creamy desserts.
Yep.
What did we have the other night? We had a peach tart that was at Three Forks in Austin, Texas.
Yep.
At another fundraiser we were doing. And we poured a little Balmoral bourbon on top of the peach tart. Whoa, it really worked nicely. Almost any ice cream, dump a little in your ice cream.
Yeah.
Any barbecue sauce, any other, anything on a grilled meat. But the reason I think that we are able to work so closely with chefs and how that culinary experience that you were talking about kind of really weaves so beautifully is because we're grain to glass.
Yeah.
We do everything by hand. All of our grains are gourmet grade. Everything that you might put on your kitchen table is the grain that is being put into this bottle, and it is ground fresh every day, and it is all from Texas farmers.
I love that.
So
Yeah.
we really want to embrace not only our responsibility to be a part of the fabric of Texas, but also just the importance of the quality. I wouldn't ever want to be in my kitchen cooking with anything less than the best of ingredients.
Yeah.
Why in the world would I want to make a bourbon that didn't have the highest quality, best tasting grains that it could have in its mash bill?
I love that. So I really now, I'm a carnitas man myself.
Oh, I love
so
carnitas.
So I'm going to have to dabble with some bourbon carnitas now.
Sounds
You know what I
pretty good.
mean?
I think
We're available.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll have to come out.
Yeah, and even if those carnitas, there might be a little bit of sauce with that. And
Yes.
It's amazing. Again, when we started this business, and you asked kind of how we work together. When I started this business, I'm a fifth generation Texan, so I knew what it was to be a part of a family business because I was the fifth generation in my family to run an over 100-year-old business.
Yeah.
The men started in the beginning, but my mother was number 4, and I really learned and modeled from her what it was to be a woman in business, what it was to be an entrepreneur, and what it was to understand to be a part of a family. But I also understood that I love to be in a kitchen, and ingredients matter.
Yeah.
So when we started thinking about how we wanted to put this bourbon together, it was very much a part of what would our family want, and what do we want to start building as our legacy of how we see the best way to make bourbon.
Yeah.
So this year is a big milestone for us because we have just started going full circle with the agricultural cycle from we get grain and from Texas Panhandle farmers who lost so many crops in the past and so much cattle in the past couple of months up in the Panhandle when
With
those
the Panhandle
storms,
fires.
the fires just ripped through
Remember
there and
that.
tore it all apart. And so all of that grain comes from up there. So we decided to pay it back. So last night we were able to raise about $60,000 for Texas Panhandle farmers who had lost their homes, had lost their tractors, had lost their irrigation systems and their fences. So
And that's to add to the $120,000 that we raised last month for them as well.
Right, that's
so
amazing.
all in an effort to give back, but even more importantly,
it's called panhandleproud.org. And you can give right there at the website.
That's good.
But what's more fun about this is, and it was the dream, the ultimate dream, is we take that grain and we turn around and we turn it into bourbon by making beer.
Yeah.
It becomes beer first, and then we suck the alcohol off of the beer. That goes into a barrel to become bourbon.
Yeah.
And then there's all that grain that's left over, which is basically low alcohol beer or no alcohol beer.
Yeah, sure.
And we feed that to the cattle in the area. So I went into a restaurant the other day in Fredericksburg, Texas, and it's called Jack's Chop House. And on the menu is a steak. It's like a bone-in porterhouse. What do they call them? Tomahawk steaks.
Yeah.
And it's enormous, $192 steak. It's made by the ranchers who feed our still slop, our beer, to their cattle.
Full cycle, right there.
Isn't that fun?
Full cycle.
Yeah. Well, it's often when we think about when we're having a nice drink, I don't know, maybe we're living our lives and we're really enjoying this. We often forget where that food comes from.
Right.
And I think the farmers and where that grain is grown and investing back into Texas as Texas gives to us.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely. And Texans are so generous, and they have such a warm heart and spirit about them. So for us to be able to do a little piece, we actually put it on the back of our bottle. Good bourbon can change the world.
Yeah.
We truly believe that that we have an amazing opportunity. It's not about the liquid as much as it is about the community.
Yeah, the community. It's the people, really. It's the idea that we can share a drink, we can break bread or tortillas.
As I
But
said.
let's go back to maybe your early days around really making the first legal bourbon in Texas. What drove you to do that?
So, right out of my last job, I was working in software marketing out of Austin. My company went belly up. Enron went belly up across Texas. 12,000 Texans lost their job, and I had to figure out what I was going to do next. And so she challenged me to go up to Kentucky because I was drinking a lot of bourbon at the time. She said maybe we'd even save money if we got.
Maybe
in that
she was just trying to get you out of the house.
Probably so.
So I went there and I met some of the nicest people I could believe. And
Family.
And they became family over time, and they still are today. And we go back and we do annual pilgrimages back to Kentucky to see our friends that helped us get into it. But the other great thing about this, and this is true, I've got the records to prove it. Before I went up to Kentucky for the very first time, I wrote a letter to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which was what it was called back then, before the very unfortunate David Koresh Waco incident,
yes, I
where they had to
remember
rebrand.
Yes.
And I wrote a letter to the TTB, and I said, if I want to make bourbon in Texas, can I call it bourbon? Or does all bourbon have to come from Kentucky?
Right.
And David Bateman, the analyst who was working for TTB at the time, emailed me back and said, of course you can make bourbon in Texas. Why would you think otherwise?
And Dan and I were like, oh my gosh.
Light bulb moment
Are
right
we-
there, right?
Right in that puddle.
Are we the only ones that know this?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
That's amazing.
And we
So-
never looked back.
We didn't. We just
You never know until you ask.
we
Never.
maxed out our credit cards.
Yeah.
We,
Right.
Borrowed
traveled
from
back
friends
forth
and
to Kentucky.
family.
We
Yeah.
stole equipment from various breweries and wineries in the area.
There's surely a statute of limitations on that.
Yeah.
We did everything we had to do just to survive, and it was ugly at times. I remember times when I was sitting in front of a cross that we have at the distillery on the very front porch, and I was down on my knees, just saying, "How are we going to make this work?"
Yeah.
Because it's tough.
Yeah.
When you have to lay off
It's your
families.
it's your livelihood.
Yeah.
It's not
Well,
just
and everyone else that
Yeah.
was part of our family that worked for Garrison Brothers. I
Right.
mean, it's their livelihood. I mean,
Yeah.
we're out in the heart of the Texas Hill Country.
Right.
These are farmers and ranchers out there.
Right.
These are legacy families that have been out in the Hill Country, for decades
Yeah.
and generations. And we take that very seriously. We are blessed with an incredible 100+ employees at this point.
Yeah.
And every one of them is family.
Yeah.
And that's part of our fabric.
Beautiful.
We also hit another big milestone this past year. We
Okay.
are now sold in all 50 states in America.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Kind of fun.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that.
Thank
So
you.
speaking of that, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
A legacy of paying it forward to those who come next. We were honored last year with the Bubble Cap Award from the American Distilling Institute at their Las Vegas conference. And then later on in that year, we won Best in Show at the American Craft Spirits Association conference. And I had so many young people coming up to us and saying, we so admire the way you've done it because we have given back along the way. We're not in this to get rich.
Right.
You can't be. It's impossible to
Yeah.
get rich off the bourbon business because
Right.
of the cycles in the wood
Yeah.
and how deep in debt you are 5 years into the business because you don't have any income coming in.
Yeah.
There's a little problem there.
Yeah.
And
It's not a great business plan.
Well,
thought
I
it
think
was
that's
just
part of the
fine.
challenge,
but
right?
we find it just fine. Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Well, that was absolutely the challenge.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to some folks earlier and saying, he was saying that he heard me in an interview once say that if I could do it all over again, what would I do differently? And that would be a real easy question. I would have raised $15 million on the very first day.
And then I said probably 25.
But then you walk into a bank and
Yeah.
they're not going to give you any money.
Yeah.
No matter what your business plan is. If you don't have any revenues coming in for 5 years, then that's a little tricky to promise the bank that you're going to pay the interest rates on the loan.
Yeah.
So that can't happen. Venture capitalists looked at me like I was out of my mind.
Crazy.
Have you ever
Yeah.
made bourbon before? No.
No.
Do you know how to make bourbon? Not a clue. What do you know about bourbon? I like to drink it.
Yeah.
That was really.
How long before return on investment?
When am I going to see my 300% return?
Right.
I
Yeah.
said, never.
Never.
So if you're going to write a check to us, you better be prepared for the ride because it's going to be a long one.
Yeah.
But it's been a ride. I mean,
Yeah.
what an incredible ride it's been. I mean, it's been an amazing journey. I think that, you know, our legacy is hopefully good bourbon for another century to go.
Yeah.
But more importantly, just that opportunity that we've been given, the blessings we've been given to put down a footprint on the path of bourbon history. And, you know, there just wasn't a lot of conversation about it in the early 2000s. A lot of other spirits were getting the shine.
Sure.
And we just felt like that we had an opportunity to really open up the conversation. We have now 8 different expressions in our Garrison Brothers lineup, all bourbon. And I would challenge anyone to not enjoy each of them individually, but there's always a common thread with them. The 94 proof small batch is where it all begins.
Yeah, beautiful.
And that's on purpose because we want to have people be able to experience bourbon in ways they haven't before.
Yeah.
And be introduced to it in many cases when they never have before, and especially women.
Yeah.
I travel all over the country and have the incredible opportunity to talk to women and talk to women one-on-one and really talk to them about what a brown spirit is.
Yeah.
And many have ideas of what that is. And to be honest, I have the challenge and I accept it heartily.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
To break down those misconceptions
Yeah.
of what bourbon is and why we should all pay attention to this incredible spirit. It is the spirit of the United States of America. It's
Right.
our spirit.
Yeah.
Trust me, she can talk about bourbon for a really long time.
I love it. No, you don't have to convince me. But this is my final question, which you know, I've heard you kind of talk a little bit about, you know, what would you do different? But I'm gonna actually maybe switch it up a little bit. What would you tell somebody that's trying to get into the industry that can't get a $15 million loan?
Sure.
What would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
Honestly, I get that question all the time. And my answer is a little bit depressing. It's not the positive outlook that everybody wants to hear it, but there's
Sure.
already
Honest is
4,000
honest.
distilleries in America,
Yeah.
and 75% of them are going out of business because they cannot get access to the marketplace. If you cannot get a distributor to sell your product in all 50 states, then at some point you're going to be in trouble
Yeah.
because you can't just rely on your home market.
Yep.
You have to get out and be all over the country. And distributors today, they look at their lineups and they have these scrolls of different names. We've got all 500 craft distilleries in Texas on our list. And the next question is, how much of that are you selling? And they're going to say, it's
Yeah.
really not worth the effort.
Yeah.
So why would they go train their sales force to be behind your tiny little brand?
Sure.
You better have powerful, deep pockets if
Yeah,
you're going to do that.
yeah.
And you better be willing to fork over some money to the
Right.
distribution
Well,
tier.
and when we started, there were 9 distilleries in Kentucky making 35 bottles of bourbon on the shelf. That was it.
That's it, right?
So, not that we had an easy road. Believe me,
Yeah.
it was a struggle every single
No, it's
day.
all part of the journey.
But compared to today,
Yeah.
there's still only 2 significant distributors in the United States. And there's only so much liquor store shelves
Yeah.
space available. It just is the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
It is a challenge today.
You know, what you've done is you laid down that foundation, I think, for many people in Texas.
We hope so.
And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Salud.
Salud.
Mondo, it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Salud.